Welcome to the F4 podcast, where your hosts, Brian, Brooke, Charles, and Vanessa, discuss all things faith, family, friends, and fitness. What is F4? Sometimes it's a glimpse into how we navigate the world, and sometimes it's a deep dive into how we handle the four main areas of our lives. If you want to have a healthier relationship with God, family, friends, and yourself, this podcast is for you. Thank you for joining us as we unpack this episode.
Welcome to episode 19 of the F4 podcast. I'm Charles Giddens, one of the F4 hosts, and I'm joined today by my wife Vanessa and our friends Brian and Brooke Marston. So thanks so much for watching and listening to our podcast. I want to take a moment and say sorry. I know we had some technical audio difficulties on the last episode, and again, I apologize for that. We felt like it was good enough to post anyway. We enjoyed it. The ding-dongs were funny. But if you haven't seen it or heard it yet, please go back and give it a listen, check it out. And if it's any consolation, we really need some sponsors now. We need a microphone, we need a new computer, we need a lot of things. So if you would like to be a sponsor of the show, you can send us a message on Instagram, Facebook, or via email at f4ncpodcast@gmail.com. If you would, please follow us on Instagram and like and share the podcast. We would greatly appreciate it. We're on multiple platforms, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Pocket, Radio Public, Breaker, Anchor, and now YouTube, so for your awesome viewing pleasure. And I thought it would be helpful today to point out for some of you that are new listening what F4 actually means. And it's what we decided to call the podcast because we discuss faith, family, friends, and fitness. And while we have some exciting new fitness-related podcasts planned and coming shortly with some friends and new guests that we have not ever done before, we have been a little bit more family-focused in the last couple of podcasts. And I think that is going to continue today as well. And it probably relates to what we all see and feel with the needs around us right now in our community and the world. So that's kind of why we've been stuck on family for the last couple of episodes. And I think it's going to continue. And hopefully you guys like that. But we are going to get back to some other stuff very shortly. So today we're going to talk about kids and parenting. And although Vanessa and I do not have a child living outside of the home at this point, we do have a 15-year-old that we have to get ready for moving and going on the rest of his life. So we thought it might be helpful for some of you to cover what it looks like to do life with your adult children and your teenage children because they're kind of in that same boat. And again, we are tackling a book, or at least part of a conversation from Dr. Jim Burns. If you remember 2 podcasts ago, we talked about his book, Creating Intimate Marriage, which we are actually still going through as a small group right now at church, and it's going very well. But this one kind of corresponds to the same thing. So what I thought we would start off today doing is kind of talking about, one, who our kids are, how old they are, and why we decided at some point we wanted to be parents, just at the very beginning. So Ness, you're up.
We have a 15-year-old son whose name is Parker. And why did we decide to be parents?
I don't know.
Be parents, they said. It'll be fun, they said. No, I don't know. It was just time. We were different than a lot of people. I think we were married for 8 years before we ever had children, even though we were married fairly young. I was 24. You were 25 when we got married, and didn't have Parker until I was 33.
Yeah, we were in our 30s.
34.
Yeah.
33. I don't know. However old I was.
Yep.
But, yep.
Yep. How about you two?
Actually, remember being in a seminary class and talking to a guy about his kids and his approach to having kids. And he was like, I'm going to trust that the Lord's going to give us what we need. And so it was a conversation about birth control. And his wife was not on birth control. And I felt convicted by it. I felt like I was trying to make life work the way I wanted it to, and trying to kind of control the circumstances by us being, and I say us, Brooke being on birth control. And so we had a conversation about it. And this was in April of 1999. We'd been married a couple months. She came off birth control. In the next month, she was pregnant.
That would have been, he was born in 2001, so I wasn't pregnant that long.
Oh, yeah.
We'd been married a year.
We'd been married a year. Yeah, that's right. But right after we had that conversation, I'm glad you're here to clarify that, by the way.
No, just making sure.
I'm a little messed up. But as soon as I had that conversation with you after talking with him, you came off of it and you got pregnant. Mm-hmm. And we were like,
Well, I had already been
Wow.
having some changes in my body that weren't good with the birth control, or I felt like it was because of the birth control. And so when you mentioned that, it was actually an easy decision, because things weren't, a lot of times I guess birth control makes things more regular and better, but they were not more regular. I was starting to have more, issues in the feminine world. And so I was already trying to decide, what do we need to do about this? Because it wasn't good.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I'm glad you're here, because now that I'm thinking back on it, I'm like, yes, it was April of 2000. Mm-hmm. And then we had a baby pretty much 9 months later. Like, it happened right after you came off. So we stayed that way for the course of the next 6 years, and had 4 kids in 5 years. And then we took care of that, and it was based.
We took care of that. I like the use of the word we.
Everything is a we, because it doesn't happen by yourself. Mm-hmm. But we made a decision with the doctor's advice to not do that again, because you had 4 cesareans, which isn't good on a body. At least that's what she said.
It's something, I guess. So now our kids we have 2 sons, 22 and 20, and 2 daughters, 18 and 16.
No.
17.
She is 17.
I left her at 16.
Is that where you wanted to
So
stay?
I don't know what year you got pregnant, and you don't know how old
How old our
youngest-
kids are? Yeah, she's 17. I was
So-
like, that's not right. She should be an odd year if our oldest isn't even. They're 5 years apart.
So together we make a complete brain.
Yep. Glad you're here.
Same.
Yeah, when we and I say we loosely decided that we were not. Well, it was kind of weird, because you were not on birth control at all when we got married, and it was one of those things like, hey, do we want to worry about this or not? And we decided that again, we're going to trust and just say, well, we're not going to try, but we're not going to try, and we're going to see how it goes. And we ended up getting pretty well. Vanessa had been pregnant before, and we had a miscarriage. So when that came around and things were a little bit different, it didn't take very long.
No, and if you remember, once we moved up north, I was like, there's not a chance.
Yeah.
I am not going to have a child up here
Yeah.
in the great white north with no friends and no family and no help, and it gets dark at 3:00 in the afternoon.
It's actually 4, but
And so once we moved back, yes, and I sound like a warden, but once I gave the green light, it was it didn't take long at all.
well, So again, Vanessa and I have not read this book. So by Dr. Jim Burns, is Doing Life with Your Adult Children, and Brian and Brooke went through this book with a bunch of people at church and found it very helpful. But we have not yet read it. because of where we are in our station in life. So some of today is going to look a little different. We do have a 15-year-old that some of this is starting to come into play, and I think is helpful for at least us to hear, because we want things to be different at 19, 20, 21, 22, 25, 30, 40, if we make it that long, with Parker. So some of this is going to be a little out there for me because I haven't put my hands on the book yet. I bought it, but I haven't read it. But some things that are in there, and a quote that came up, and it's actually from a movie, is that, I saw this going differently in my mind. So I think with parenting, it's very easy to have a preconceived notion of what it's going to look like initially and what it's going to look like for the entire time that you have kids. And, at 15, Parker's 15, I can safely say that has not even been remotely close to what I thought it was going to be. But you guys have had kids that are now out of the house. You have 2 out of the house. You have 2 still in the house. Is it what you thought you saw? Is this what you saw when you decided you wanted to have kids?
No, it's not. And I think part of it is that when you have kids and you get them as a baby, if people adopt kids that are older, I don't know what that's like, so I can't speak to that. But when you get a kid and he's a baby or she's a baby and they depend on you for everything, it sort of seems like it's going to be like that forever. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the reason is that it takes so much energy. You're not sleeping and you have to do everything for them in the beginning. And it just, people say the days are long, but the years are short. That's one of those other things that people say. And it's true, especially in those early days, the days seem so long. And it seems like it's going to always be like that. I'm sorry, this is going to be bad. It seems like it's always going to be like that. And then all of a sudden, it's not. And it happens, there are different stages. I mean, I think all of a sudden, once everybody's potty trained and they can dress themselves and they can do certain things, then you look around and go, oh, this is different. They don't require as much of me in this realm as they used to, so now the relationship changes. And then you sort of get used to that stage, and then they get car keys. And then the relationship changes again, and then they move out, and the relationship changes again. And so it's not what I thought. And I think just as you get used to the way things are, then they change again. And that's natural, and it's as it should be. And some of it is great. There are some pieces of it that are really, really great. I mean, I think for us, the ages when everybody was, when May was 5 and Micah was 10 and the others were in between. And then for the next 3 or 4 years, maybe even 5 years, I mean, that was awesome. Because everybody could go places, everybody could do stuff. They could take care of themselves for the most part. For the most part, they still wanted to be with us. It was easy to have fun together, and then you get into they don't know anything, and you just kind of get into that phase. And for us, because ours are so close together, once one got there, then you're like, oh my goodness, what is happening with this one? And then the next one comes along and it's like, oh gosh, well, this is just where we live now. Just go ahead and forward the mail here because this is our life. And so anyways, no, it's not what I expected to answer your question. And I think it's because it continually changes. At least that's my perspective on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with your answer. No. It's not what I expected. I think I thought that I would have a better handle on. Hey, you're gonna make me cry. Yeah, I thought I was gonna have a better handle on, I guess, the control piece of that. Yeah, I got this. And and I'm having a hard time articulating myself here. I felt like it would be easier than it has been to have that relationship. And I think I don't like some of the things that have happened inside of me internally where I'm like, I love you, but I don't like you. Like I wouldn't hang out with you if I had a choice. And I hate feeling that way because yet it's like a conflicting thought and feeling that go with that because I remember them thinking I was the greatest thing in the world. I didn't expect this emotion. You got me down a track.
Sorry.
I can't blame you. It's there. I guess it's underneath the surface. What I didn't expect is for them to think that I wasn't so great. And that's been hard.
Yeah. But it goes both ways. I mean, like, they don't necessarily think we're so great, and we don't always think they're so great. So it's
You're
not
right.
that different than any other relationship. But I think with your kids, you think, I don't know, like they're part of you. So
Yes.
it seems like it's going to be different.
It does seem like it's going to be different. And you hear people that are doing things that are just like way out there, and you're like, man, we're going to give our kids the best, right? And we're going to have them in church, and we're going to have people around them that are going to support them. But we've been let down a lot in church. And that's all part of that. We've created systems that have done wonders for other people and their families.
Seemingly, yes.
Seemingly. We would think that. But maybe haven't created the same for our own. But, I'm not blaming anybody. That's not, at the end of the day, our kids have their own will. They've had so much opportunity. And, at this point, we realize there's a lot that we don't control. And really, that's a good thing. But it's humbling.
But what about you guys? I mean, was parenting what you thought it was going to be? I'm sorry, you have a question.
No, I don't have a question. No, it's not. But here's what struck me listening to you. Not that we're not all in church, because we are. So we're both I'm in seminary. You're almost done. I'm about to finish up. And I think there's a lot of things in our lives, all of our lives, that have been called to a higher purpose. But you know what it must be like for what you just said? Think about what that is for God. Like, it must be that times 1 million or times infinity, right? Sometimes I'm like, ooh, I can be so much a better son. I could be so much different, and yet I at times turn away. At times I do things that I know I'm not supposed to do. But listening to you talk, that's all I could think about was like, ooh, man, like, what bad children are we? And you wonder, like, for God to give us the grace that he gives us, knowing that we don't always do what we need to do, I mean, that's just like, ooh, I don't know. For me, listening to you, I'm like, that's all I kept thinking about. I'm like, man, we need to stop screwing up.
Well, it's like, let me just paint a picture for when they were younger and could articulate themselves. Like, they wanted to be with us to the point where we're like, oh, we need a break. And there's 4 of them that are all like, they're in a 5-year period, so it's just all on all the time. And now it's flipped so much now between the ages of 17 and 22 that it's almost like a lot of times they act like it's an annoyance to have to talk to us. And I know you understand this with your 15-year-old, but it really seems insulting. Yeah. And I have to try not to take it personally. That's why that book was really good for me, because there's part of me it's like, fine, but that's not mature. So it's a huge contrast from what it once was, and no one can prepare you for it. People can tell you all day. I do see some exceptions to that. I wish we were the exception. We are not.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can beat myself up and say, what if I'd done something different or just done something better? And I don't know if I could have or not to make this dynamic better. But
Well, and I will also say that different ones of our kids are also different. So there's definitely each one of them is unique.
yeah.
So the dynamics with each one are also unique. I think some of them are less, I don't think you're great, than others.
Yeah.
You know, some are easier to be around than others. But again, just like all people, all relationships, I think that's true.
I would agree.
So, I mean, for the sake of this conversation, we kind of lumped them all right there together because they are close in age, but each one of them is different.
That
So-
is 100% true, and they make different decisions, and some things are surprising, other things are not. And so, in fairness, they are not all the same, but it can feel that way because they're all on the same stage, like you said. Yeah, and it's not like it's not like there's not any communication. We have communication with all four of our kids. They're just dynamics that are in those relationships that I wish were different.
They're each mature in different ways.
Correct.
They're not, so when you're talking about adult children, some of your kids behave more adult in certain aspects of their life than others of your children, and they're each mature, just some of them in different areas.
That is a really great way to say it. It's a great way to say it.
What?
So is it what you expected?
Oh. Oh, okay. No. If I'm being completely frank, I don't think I had expectations. The first the first 5 months of Parker's life, it was just keeping him alive. I mean, it was survival mode for me. It was survival mode for us. It was survival mode for him. I mean, us being in survival mode for him. And then there was, after his second surgery, when he was 9 months, which was a much more minor surgery. But after that point, it was there were he had open heart surgery at 5 months old. And there were complications from the surgery that made everything drag out for about 6 weeks. So I don't think and then once he was healed from that initial surgery, he had another more minor surgery that he had to undergo. And so I feel like and that was at 9 months. I feel like the first 9 months of his life, every day was a blessing, but every day was hard. And there was this sense of relief, I think, once he was like 9 months after his second surgery. And like that 10-month, I talk about it sometimes being my favorite time with him because it was like the sense of relief and I was actually able to enjoy. And he's a really smart kid. He always has been, super smart kid. And I was able to enjoy teaching him things, and I could allow myself to imagine a future for him. So, and then, I mean, kind of beyond that, my parents were my parents. So
Sure.
I really had no expectations. So is it what I expected? No, but I don't know what I expected, actually. What about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think right now what I thought and what I experienced prior to the last couple weeks have been a little different. The last couple weeks have kind of changed my expectations or changed my thought process in general, and probably hit me harder than I thought it would. Parker has started seeing or dating, whatever. I don't even know what they call it. Whatever they.
He has a girlfriend.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you call it that, but whatever it is. And I think the change in him is a little disappointing. I get it, but it hit me a little bit differently than I thought it was going to. Mm-hmm. In the last couple of years, there have been changes. Obviously, as he's gotten older and became a teenager and did things differently. But things have really shifted very quickly with this, to a point that I'm not enjoying it really. And it's funny because my mother sent me a text the other day. She's like, did she come over? And I'm like, yes. And she's like, well, enjoy the next chapter of your parenting relationship. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to like this. I don't. So no, it's not what I expected. I don't think I like it a whole lot. And he's not even out of the house. So, at 15, Parker and I have had our struggles. We're very much, it's just, we're very different in a lot of ways. So we've had our struggles. Not that I don't love him, or I'm sure he loves me, but it's a different relationship than you have with him. And it's even now changed more for me, which makes it even more distant. And no, it's not what I expected, which I don't like a whole lot, but, it kind of is what it is. So, I think we're going to ride it out until whenever, and maybe, he doesn't make some of the same mistakes that I made, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Hard stop.
Yep.
No, it's fine. I just, I could talk about that forever, and it's really not going to change anything. So, so as your kids, and really ours too, but your kids in general, transition more to adulthood, what makes it difficult for you to change your job description role as a parent?
Well, you've been doing things a certain way for a long time. And you then, like in our case, we have 4 kids that while they're in a similar age range, they're still in different stages. Mm-hmm. And so you have 2 that live outside the home. You have 1 that's in college that lives inside the home, just turned 18 last summer. And then you have 1 that's 17, has another year of high school after this year. And that's just challenging because you kind of want to lump them all into one category, but you can't. And so I don't know. I feel like I have job descriptions that are different for all of them. And that's also variable based on the decisions they're making, where they are, because that impacts the relationship and how we approach them. But how we approach them with the decisions they're making, whether they're good or something that we would be like, we don't agree with that. It's all variable. So I feel like I have this job description. I feel like I have 4 of them, and they're all different. I don't know. That doesn't sound like that's a lot of fun. The more I'm saying this out loud, I'm going, this sounds terrible. Why did we do this?
Well, it's making it sound like it's really, really bad, and it's really not that bad.
But the more I'm talking out loud, I'm like,
we need to change how this sounds.
Life is hard.
I think you're right. I think that they are definitely in a stage where while they're still close in age, the rules aren't necessarily the same for all of them.
Yep.
Just because they're really in kind of that transition phase. And so while, as a parent, you want to work yourself out of a job, that's ultimately the goal, right? Because none of us want to raise kids that are 35 years old and don't know how to make it in the world on their own. They don't know how to hold a job. They don't know how to pay their own bills. They don't know how to live independently. Like, I don't think any of us really desire. That's not our goal in parenting. The goal is, okay, we've raised a person who functions in society. They can do all the things that they need to do, and they're a contributing member of society in one way or another. But that doesn't mean that you stop caring. And I think that's the hard thing, is that your heart is so wrapped up in, it's a job that, you want to work yourself out of a job, but you don't want to work yourself out of a relationship.
Yep.
And those two things are so interconnected. It can be hard to know where one, ends and the other begins. And so I think that's kind of what makes that transition. Even you guys are kind of on the front end of it, because while he still lives at home, you are trying to begin doing those things that set him up for independence in the next 3 to 4 years. And that's not something you learn overnight. So you're starting to kind of do those things. He wants to be independent. He's already feeling those. I mean, I guess that's biological, he's wanting to be independent. You're trying to respect that and give him opportunities to be independent. At the same time, you can see things that he doesn't see because of your life experience. And, but your heart is so intertwined in it. Like, you don't want your kid to make mistakes or to have to make mistakes. But, I mean, we all know that mistakes are they're a huge part of learning. And we made mistakes. And those are the things that taught us the most. But sitting by and watching it, and feeling like, oh my goodness, there's something we could do to prevent this, or there's something we could do to change it. But if I step in, they miss out on this lesson. So now I'm just got to sit here and watch. It's awful.
Yeah, it doesn't mean we don't speak up and say what we need to say sometimes, but we've gotten a lot quieter because experience is a better teacher. I would say wisdom is the greatest teacher, but when people aren't listening to wisdom, then experience becomes a part of wisdom. It's like the lower level. Sometimes it's foolishness.
Yeah, I think to your point, trying to set him up for adulthood. I mean, recently this week, Parker has now, so he's had a savings account forever, but now he has a checking account. So we set that up for him. And it's funny because he's always had to tithe loosely when he got money from the time we were Spring Hill, little itty bitty, right? But now he has his checking account and he got money for his birthday. And it was, it's a relatively large amount of money to me. It was like, oh, I didn't have that money when I was 15. Not that I didn't work for it, because at 15 I was already working. So I did have that money, but I didn't get it gifted.
It wasn't just given to you.
It wasn't given to me, So the other day he came home and I was like, oh, well, you have it. So now let's set up how we need to get our account set up with Rebel Give. We need to, what do we do for church? What do we do for savings? This is how we handle things. This is how you transfer money. This is what you do. And things are different than when I was a kid, where you had cash and everything was cash and you did it. So it is different. But watching him, I was like, how much money is in your account? How much money did you get? And he said it. And I was like, oh, so what do we have to give? And he's like, I was like, oh, okay. Well, here's what we do.
You're like, God loves a cheerful giver.
Yeah, he's not yet at the point where he can give with a joyful heart.
No, he's not. But
he is not alone.
No, he's not. I know that. But trying to set that up now, I can see why it's so hard when he's 21, 22, 25, 30, why that would be so hard. Because I thought we had done a good job up until now kind of instilling that in him. But then when he gets money in his checking account, he's like, oh, this is a big number. I don't want to do that. Like, why would I do that?
And really, that's a small number.
It is. It is. It is.
But it does reveal greed.
Right.
And I mean, he's not alone in that.
No. He's like 10%. I was like, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you have 10 apples, one apple.
Away.
Got to give one of the 10.
He's very much my kid. He's like, oh, I got to do that, and I got to put money in my savings account? I'm like, yes, you do. Yes. But it was funny.
But that only leaves me this much to spend. Yep.
Yep. Sorry about your luck.
Imagine if you had bills.
And he doesn't understand that God is involved in that.
No.
Being the giver of all that.
No.
Yet you've probably talked about that.
Sure. Yeah. I thought we did.
It doesn't mean you haven't. It just, we understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
now the experience is going to have to be his.
Yeah.
It's not theory anymore. It's going to have to be his experience. And so that's,
And it's funny because he's been checking when I picked him up from school on Friday, he opened up the app and he said, it hasn't been taken out yet.
The Wells Fargo app. Or
Yeah, he pulled up his banking app on his phone and he could see that Rebel Give hadn't been deducted yet, even though he had made that transaction, which also is kind of a testament to the instant nature of his generation and how everything is right now, including money out.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a couple days for that to show up, so...
Yeah, I mean, I can remember when I was a kid writing checks, because we wrote checks.
Oh, yeah.
And it could be a long time, like, when's that money going to come out? Oh, that money's still in there. They must have just lost that check. I'm going to spend that money. And that, not a good idea.
Yeah, bad plan.
Bad plan. Yeah, it was a bad plan. It was a bad plan. So you talked about caring earlier, which is kind of funny. So what's the difference between a parent caring and enabling their teenage or adult children?
Ugh. It's hard to know where that line is, I think. But I think he talks about this in the book. I think if you, whatever you're doing, if it moves a kid more toward dependence on you, then that's enabling. If the move moves them, or the decision moves them more toward independence, then that's where you really want to go. But if it's a constant, and it can be easy things like, and I have a couple of kids that have no problem in this area and then who struggle in this area, getting themselves out of bed in the morning. Like an alarm clock goes off, they get out of bed. I have a couple kids, no problem. A couple other kids, it's a little bit different. And they've had to employ some different methods to become more independent in that. And watching your kid be late for something because he or she did not get out of bed when their alarm went off, it's gut-wrenching to watch. But if I'm always going in and waking them up, am I moving them toward independence? No, I'm the alarm clock. They can set an alarm clock, but they're not depending on that alarm clock. They know it goes off and, oh, mom's going to come in and wake me up. When a kid moves out of your house and has a job or has a class that they have to attend, and you know that you've bailed them out by waking them up in the morning
while they were still at home,
but you're not there anymore, it's like, well, guess they're gonna figure that out. You know what I mean?
Yes. So because you would rather them have failure under your watch, so that the failure doesn't happen the first time outside of your watch, because you can then help them frame the failure and work through it, as opposed to when they're away at a university and then maybe they're covering it up because there's no accountability.
Because if they're at home, then you can say, okay, well, what are things that we can do to make sure this doesn't happen? And, then you have all the tricks of don't ever hit snooze, set your alarm clock on the other side of the room, get it once your feet hit the floor, you're up. Like, you can talk about all those things, but...
Because see, like the contrast of, let's say, okay, 15, their kid's 15. When they're 15, you still do have a degree of control in the fact that they're in your home. And so
and they depend on you to drive them places too.
100%. When they're out of the house, you may have a degree of control based on financial support or whatever. But it is so different. And so your teaching is almost, if they're not asking for it, it's not happening. You become Charlie Brown's teacher. You can say all you want, and they're just like, whatever. I can do what I want, how I want, when I want. So when you have them at 15, you still have the ability to help them grow. But if you're enabling them at that point, then you're not helping them move toward the independence that they need to be successful. And that's what I kind of hear you saying.
And I think sometimes with some kids, like maybe it's important to say, hey, I'm going to tell you up front, it's your job to get yourself up in the morning. I'm not going to I'm not going to check on you. So if you don't get up, it's on you. Just FYI. I mean, like, I tend to maybe not say that and just do that, you know? But I do think it's helpful to say, hey, just FYI, this is the way it's going to be. You know?
Yeah.
Our kids, we always had them pay for their own car insurance and their own gas and all that stuff. So we were very upfront with them. Hey, drive however you want. But if you get a ticket and your insurance goes up, because it will, we're not bailing you out of that. Like, you're owning, you already know how expensive it is when you have no tickets. It goes up from there. It almost never goes down, you know? So you're going to, I'm not in the car with you. I can't control how you drive. And I'm not going to nag you about it.
One of the biggest things that I'm hearing you, both of you, talk about is that you are, instead of enabling or covering things up, I think you're both doing a very good job of creating teaching moments and making sure that not only are you setting a good example in the way you live your lives for your kids, which I think is super important, but you're also the failures that you are helping them work through, you're helping them work through so that they don't repeat those same mistakes. And you're setting the things up in a way that says, look, there will be consequences for these types of actions. This is how you can avoid those consequences. And you're letting them know what the consequences are, instead of being, because I think you can enable and you can overprotect and you can prohibit the learning from happening, but you can also be too hands off, I think, and either not work to set that good example for your kids, or just be like, okay, sarah.
Yeah, figure it out.
Yeah.
I would say we're definitely trying to do that. I don't know that we always get it right. I think we're definitely trying, but when you were talking, I was like, and the really frustrating thing is they don't appreciate that.
No, like, here's the thing. And moving them toward independence, you're moving them away from you. And that's really difficult. And we were having a conversation on the way over here about how so many people don't understand why people get married. And that's one of the biggest problems on why people have marriage problems, is they don't understand why they get married in the first place.
Yeah, the purpose of marriage in the first place.
That's right. They don't understand the purpose and the why. And they haven't answered that question either accurately or at all. It's just like, I want to be able to have sex whenever I want to have it without guilt, or, you said something really good.
So I love this person. I don't want to imagine my life without this person in it.
Yeah, and when you said my life, it's a very selfish orientation, and marriage is never meant to make us more selfish or to indulge all of our expectations or all of our desires. Marriage was meant to ultimately bring us closer to Jesus, which, what does it mean to follow Jesus? He said, well, you need to deny yourself, take up your cross, and then follow him, and that's not easy. And so, but yet at the same time, I know as I move toward God, it's like a triangle. Brooke and I, we come together, but that takes work. And I think parenting is the same way, as you're moving them toward independence, not dependence on God, but not dependence on us. It requires humility, and that's been really hard.
And it is a faith thing as well, because you have to, there's a part of you that thinks, I'm the best person to protect and take care of this child, this person. And then, I know who cares more, right? We dedicated our kids, when they were babies in our churches, like, to bring them up in a way that, is honoring to the Lord and all of that. And we were saying, God, we trust you with this life that you've given to us. We know we are just stewards of this life. But I think in our heads, there's a part of us that is like, yeah, but I'm the best person to take care of this person, this baby.
Yeah.
And otherwise God wouldn't have given him to me, right? Because but then when you really have to move a child toward dependence, I think it becomes really obvious that you never really were in control. and that God is a far better teacher and a far better father or mother than we ever could be. And so allowing him to be the one to do the work in the life of our kids, it is a faith and a trust issue that, then I have to work through in my relationship with Jesus. It's weird. It's good, but it's weird. I say it's good. It's also painful, but
Painful.
Crunch.
yes.
Yeah, I think some of the things that I struggle with now, listening to what you just said, and letting, especially when it comes to sleeping and doing, like, again, my life revolves around time for some reason. I don't know why, but it does. So
You're monochronic.
I am. So, like, knowing that if I don't go in and wake Parker up on it, let's say tomorrow morning, which is tonight, Saturday, tomorrow morning he has to go to church, he has to serve, he has to do things, right? So if I don't wake him up and he doesn't get up, he's letting other people down, right? Which in turn, to me, is a big impact because you don't know, and maybe this is me putting too much emphasis on this, but I don't know what someone is saying it out loud sounds stupid. I don't know if someone's coming to church tomorrow that is going to need to hear something a certain way. And it's dependent on Parker pushing a slide or running sound or running light in a way that would impact their eternity. So at what point do I go, you're right, I'm going to have to let him sleep in. I'm going to have to let him learn consequences, because it's one thing if it's school, right? And I'm not saying I don't want him to go to school, but it's another thing to say you're impacting other people in a way that I'm not comfortable with at all. Like, how do you handle that? Because
I think you've got to communicate expectations up front, and then you've got to be willing to discipline accordingly for where he is in his life. So ultimately, you want him to be making the choice to do it. Like, I've had one that said she's going to do certain things at church, and she has not been there when I've said, okay, well, if you want to do this particular role, I need you here at this time, because it's you being in there at the time to do that role. Then if it doesn't happen, then other things don't happen. And she really said, I want to do this, which I said, great, we would love to have you do it, but I need you here at this time. And when she didn't show up, I had someone else do it multiple weeks, and she got mad. And we had
I think hurt is a more accurate word than mad. But
I think it would be mad and hurt. I think she was hurt, but she responded with angry emotion that other people even saw. Right? And so this past week, guess who was on time to do that task that she said she wanted to do? She was. But she had to be the one to discipline herself to do it. And so much so to the point where I was willing to do it myself, to say, you know what? This is important because it impacts other people. So you have to be willing to sacrifice, and it may fall back on you. It may make you look bad. And I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, but I've felt that way before.
Sure.
And want my kids to make me look good, because people will judge you by your kids, whether you like it or not. And I want people to like me, and I want people to be impressed by me. And they can make people not impressed by you.
Yeah.
in a hurry.
Right.
In a hurry.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the problem, and not the problem, but I think that's the challenge with PKs, right? And although I'm not an ordained pastor at this point, I'm basically doing the same thing in a lot of areas. So it's like, okay, he's feeling that same pressure. I'm feeling the pressure because, to your point, I do want, like, especially in children's ministry and youth ministry, you're like, wow, you can't get your kid to do that, but you want to talk to me about my kid and help my kid do that? So I get it. I think my concern or problem comes into not necessarily about me, although probably there is something there to say I don't want to look bad. But I think in that role, if he doesn't do it, it's kind of like we don't have many people trained to do tech in our church, right? Because we're just not that big. So it's like, well, if he doesn't show up, then what do we do? And we're scrambling, and then you have to do things that aren't good for you, or you have to change and get somebody else to do it, and then things are not. Are they still going to run? Sure, they're still going to run.
We'll be fine.
They will. I know.
We'll be fine.
I know. I get it, but it's just like
You need to parent him the way he needs to be
No.
parented, and we'll deal with the consequences. I'm telling you right now,
I know.
if you need to make a decision, you don't need to make an excuse that helps you doesn't help you move him toward independence.
Sure.
I keep thinking of words, and it's like, no. You want to move him toward independence. So you just need to know that I'm supportive of that from the role I sit in, and we'll figure it out, because we do have enough depth now to where if you weren't to show up, for the most part, we'd be fine.
Sure. It's funny because Vanessa and I are very different in that regard. Like, she'll just let him sleep, which drives me nuts sometimes. I'm like he still has to go to church. He still has to go to church. He has to go to school. He has to do, he still has to get up. Like, so, and at some point so I guess I would ask, so at what point is that enabling versus if you,
Well, I want to be very clear, because some of the
Go ahead.
people watching and listening don't know us and don't know our family. When you say I let him sleep, I don't let him miss school. I don't let him miss church.
okay,
I wait and let him scramble around and be frantic,
No, you let
trying
him
to
be
get
late.
ready,
you let him be late.
and let him late. Yes, not
Okay.
miss.
Which to me okay. Anyway,
I'm sorry that creates anxiety for you.
it doesn't create anxiety for me. I was not allowed to be late. So, and now maybe at your point, maybe that's my problem. I was not allowed to be late, so I'm not late. And that's my point. Like, at what point doing that, as someone like me, I wasn't allowed to be late. Like, there was no late for me growing up. It was get up, get out of bed, and I'm going to bonk you in the head if you don't. And now I'm not late for anything. I don't oversleep. I don't.
Let me ask you a question. How
Sure.
good are you at showing grace to other people?
It's a challenge. It's always been a challenge. I think I'm getting better, but it's a challenge. I mean, because I guess at the end of the day, it's like everything else. I go back to well, like, I don't want to get up. Like, I don't. People are like, oh, you just like getting up in the morning. No, I don't. I don't like getting up in the morning. I'd rather sleep. Like, are you crazy? Like, I don't like getting up either. However, life has to function and has to go, and being present and on time for things makes it go easier. It doesn't solve, it doesn't fix everything, but it definitely makes it not create another problem that you have to work through if you're late.
Well, I think that I honestly think that both of you make valid points, and I think with our kids, every one of them's different.
Sure.
And so, if him scrambling teaches him, if that becomes the thing that clicks in his brain and says, I do not ever want to feel that feeling again, I'm going to do whatever it takes to not feel that feeling, then that was an excellent teacher. If he doesn't care, then another tactic needs to be involved. And it might still involve him being late, but something else probably needs to happen so that whatever it is clicks in his brain that other people are counting on him, or that he needs to do something differently.
Sure.
I think that it's just like anything else. When we realize, hey, if I keep doing this the same way but I'm not getting different results, then I probably need to try something else. And and one time isn't necessarily the. And I don't know what the magic number, I don't know that there is a magic number, because relationship and people they're so nuanced. And I think in the last couple of weeks you've experienced, there's been a motivation for school, at least, that has been different in the past.
Yeah, it's about 5 feet tall, dark curly hair.
And that motivation seems to be the thing at this point that miraculously he can get out of bed and get ready for school on time. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's finding that right motivation, whatever it is. And I think sometimes it's, depending on personality and all of those things, sometimes it's punitive, but sometimes it's just a dangling the right carrot, So, sorry, was that a bad
There's definitely
metaphor?
No, it wasn't a bad metaphor. I think that you're right, It may be that what made them late. Okay, they overslept. Well, what led to the oversleeping? Were they up late on their phone? Were they up late doing something that they wanted to do? Then that's where at 15, your ability to still bring discipline into his life then comes into play, which means that you have to do the hard work of the discipline and you have to follow through on it. To not do that is lazy, but I understand the lazy. I understand it's not convenient. Taking car keys away from a child that's used to driving places,
and you're used to them driving places.
Then it inconveniences you.
Sure.
But if you're not willing to do that, then you're not going to move them toward independence. You're going to keep doing the things that make it easier for you, which is going to keep them dependent on you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think one of the best things that we've done with Parker, and anybody that's listening to this, I would tell you, I would challenge you to this, and most people don't do this, and they're going to listen to this and go, there's no way. But taking his phone, he has to turn his phone on every night at a certain time. You know,
we do that too.
Right. Well, we got that from you guys. So, but I can see that the benefits of that, but the hassle of that, like every night, it's almost, and at certain nights maybe not as bad, but now we went through a time that it was really hard, and then it was really easy, and now it's really hard again because of a 5-foot, dark-haired, curly person. And there's nothing wrong with her.
She's a curly person.
She's a curly person.
She's a curly person. There's nothing wrong with her. I met her for the first time last weekend, and I very much enjoyed being around her. But, I mean, he wants to be on the phone with her all the time, right? So now, this last week, it's become a problem again at, 9:30. Give me your phone. Oh, no, I don't want to give you my phone. Oh, why do we have to do that? Why do we have to do this? Why do we have to do that? So it's very much a struggle again. And it would be very easy for me to say it's just not worth the headache. But if you're listening, if you've never done it, it would make your life so much easier to just take your kid's phone. Just take it. Then they're not as bad in the morning. Like, as bad as it is to get him up in the morning, if he was up all night on his phone like some of these kids, oh my gosh. I can't.
And there have been times that he has been up all night on his phone.
There have been 2 nights that I know of that.
Well, I mean,
and I'm not
but even
pointing fingers, but yes, there have been.
Yes. Regardless of the circumstances, it is very different.
Shame.
Hey, lessons were learned.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's data to back up.
Now there is.
There's data to back up. It's not just theory.
I don't want to chase a rabbit. I'm going to make a quick statement, and then we can move on. Going back to the parenting piece at the very beginning, what I never could have anticipated in 2001 when we had Micah was managing a child with a computer in their pocket that gave them access to the world.
Yeah, because we didn't have those then. They didn't exist.
And I absolutely hate that part of parenting because there's so much that's lost as far as the connection piece with us personally, because they're constantly connecting with other people, and then they feel a need to maintain those connections that are beyond what their normal capacity should be. And so then it really diminishes the connection we're able to have with them when we're face to face, because they have those connections with all those other people, and they're feeling like they got to maintain those.
Yes. I think it's not even them. It's not even your kids anymore. It's just people in general. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think about this. How often do you have conversations with people and you can't have a conversation because it's, I'm
talking about this in church tomorrow. I mean, it's not the whole thing, but it's my opening.
Yeah.
Is one of the things I love about cell phones and one of the things I hate.
I mean, it's neat to be able to carry around a whole encyclopedia in your phone. That's neat. I mean, it's cool. Anytime I want to know something, I can look it up. Like, I have an answer immediately. We talked about this. It was today or yesterday. We were talking about something. It's like, just Google it, look it up, and that's fantastic. When you're so attached to it, and this generation is so attached to it because they're native. Like, it's not for us. It's not native. We didn't grow up with that. We adapted pretty quickly, but they don't know what it's like not to have that. And I think looking at that and just people in general, I do think you're right. It's something I never would have expected to have to deal with, because when I was a kid, I never had it. So it wasn't something that came up, and I didn't anticipate what that was going to do, because it has been rough. Mm-hmm. What, you're looking at me like you?
I'm just thinking and kind of connecting dots with a whole bunch of different things right now. I think that the technology enables our kids to have fleeting everything. Everything is fleeting. Relationships are much more fleeting. Interests can be much more fleeting. Granted, there are still some that, and thankfully our child's love of music is something, that has kind of stuck. There was a time when I was worried it wasn't going to stick, but we worked through that and it stuck. But even think about when we were kids, if there was something that we were interested in and something we wanted to learn more about, we had to wait. Mm-hmm. We had to hold on to that. And we had to imagine what it would be like to find out more information. Or, if when I started playing soccer, I had to wait for practices to start to learn more about soccer. Now, if I want to know about soccer, if I want to know about anything I don't know about, when he started marching band, I didn't know anything about marching band. YouTube. I became a DCI junkie for a little while, watching all the videos and learning all the things about all the different marching bands and what looked good and what sounded terrible. But I mean, it's easy we can connect with somebody until we don't want to anymore. We don't have to wait until Saturday afternoon when we can go to their house and hang out with them. Mm-hmm. We can have a conversation with them without even talking to them.
You're right.
Which means we have to set those boundaries to delay gratification ourselves. The problem is our kids haven't learned to do that. And even adults can be argued haven't learned to do that well. But our kids especially, with their attention and with their appetites, are easy prey for advertisers and all the stuff that's out there. And that's really hard to manage, especially when you take it to 4.
Yeah. So what's your response to this quote? Letting our children go and letting our dreams for our children go must be counted among our necessary losses.
What was the question that goes with that quote?
What's your response to the quote, letting your children go and letting our dreams for our children go must be counted among our necessary losses?
It's definitely a loss.
Yeah.
Again, it makes it sound like raising kids is terrible, and it's not. It's just I mean, at least I hoped that, and I guess saying it out loud sounds dumb, like you talked before, but like I didn't want my kids to experience bad choices or the consequences of bad choices. I didn't want them to experience what it looks like just to do what everybody else is doing. Like I had hoped that they would be fine with standing out among their peers as a person who loves Jesus and wants to make the right choice and operates with integrity. And even though it's hard to be lonely, they embrace it because of a bigger purpose. And that sounds, I know that sounds like really lofty and like way too much of a burden to put on a person, but like I had hoped that their desire for Jesus would be such that would be huge, And so, and I'm not saying that my kids don't value God or love him in any way. They all have different ways of expressing their relationship with God, but sometimes I look at the choices and I look at some of the things that happen and I'm like, this is not what I pictured. It's not what so it's a loss. Yeah, and it's weird because they are still alive. they are living, breathing. We still have this active relationship, yet there is a sense of loss. So that quote makes me want to cry because there's not anything I can do about it. And I know that some of it is that my dreams and my thoughts and all of those things, I set myself up for that because those are unrealistic on my end. And then on the other end, they are people that also have to learn the same way that I had to learn. And so you just hope that your kids don't have the same kind of regrets that you have, or that, you know what I mean? Like, you just hope that their life is better because they made better choices. So, anyways.
I have nothing to add to that. I think you said that well. There's definitely loss, and you have to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's part, and I haven't read the book yet, so I don't know exactly the whole context of that. I can get a little bit of from the quote, but I think if we don't experience that, then we're forever going to be living through our children. And I think long term, that's not beneficial for them. It's not beneficial for us at all. And I do think that at some point it's probably necessary to have that loss, to your point. I think with us, and I go back to this, I remember sitting in the cardiologist's office when we first found out about Parker. And I remember having the conversation about things that his heart condition meant. And I can remember looking over at Vanessa and having her crying. And I didn't understand it. Didn't understand it at all. But going through what we've gone through in 15 years, I get it that, like, this may be a little bit easier for me just because it started before he's even born. To say, you can't play soccer. You can't run. You can't do any of the things that I expected you to do as a person growing up. And that was hard, and it was immediate, and it wasn't gradual. It wasn't anything you could see coming. It was the rug's pulled out from underneath you right now, and you're going to have to process this. And I think that probably helped us in a lot of ways. And again, I don't know what that's going to look like in 5 years when he's 20. I have no idea. I don't know. But I do think, looking at some of the people that we know, I think this has helped me not get wrapped up into what he does or what he doesn't do, because he couldn't do anything that I did growing up. He just couldn't. So those dreams died immediately, and he didn't do it. It was just killed immediately. God's like, you know what? That's not going to be part of your life. But I remember looking at Vanessa and having her boo-hooing and going, I don't get it. Why are you so upset? Like, why are you more upset about this than me? I don't know.
For me, it wasn't necessarily expectations. You said that he can't do anything that you did as a kid. For me, it was that you want every opportunity for your child. And it's different when I see Parker not embrace potential in certain areas. That's his choice. But this was not. This was an opportunity that, well, I mean, who knows what opportunities would have been there if circumstances had been different. But that same day, I remember that doctor looking at us and saying, he was giving us options. And that's another reason I was crying, because they were terrible options. And one of the things that he looked at us and said was, God gave you this baby. And he was right. And that stuck with me, forever.
Yeah.
I haven't forgotten that. And it's true. It's true for everybody. Everybody that's a parent. Yes, God gave you this baby. But I don't know. I guess it put it in a slightly different light.
Sure.
Yes, this is the baby that God has given you, how are you going to be a good steward? What are you going to do with this opportunity?
Yeah.
So,
And again, I could get to 21 and go, whoa, that was not even close to being what that was. But I don't know.
Giddy up.
Right. Yeah, I haven't gotten there yet. So right now, that's the best I got. So I want to change the tone. You guys alluded to this earlier, but I think it's a really good question. In fact, I'm loving to hear it.
You're loving to hear the answer?
That's right. Briefly describe a time that you felt your teenage or adult child was making a poor choice. How'd you respond? Uh-oh.
Which one do you want to talk about, Brooke?
Which one?
and you guys can keep things as anonymous as possible. Some people are going to know.
We want to respect their privacy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
They've already been in a fishbowl enough with their lives. And in some weird way, sometimes people, I think, glory in them doing things that are unwise and seeing them
Mess up?
make decisions that are not wise, mess up, whatever you want to say. So I guess I could speak ambiguously about this.
Go ahead. You're fine.
We had a situation not that long ago with one of our children, and we didn't agree with what they were doing, and felt like we needed to speak into it without telling them what to do, recognizing that we cannot tell them what to do. But from a morality standpoint, we needed to say, this is how we're praying. We're praying this doesn't work out for you. We love you. We're going to accept you. That will never change. But we don't accept your decision. And we didn't say any of those exact words, but
I don't know that it was like, we don't accept your decision, we just don't like it.
that's probably a more palatable way to say it. But I mean, I told this child of ours that's not a child that we are praying for the Lord's discipline in your life. And that's harder to say to your child. Because what that means is I'm asking the Lord to do whatever it takes to get him to where he needs to be. I just said him. So.
And I think that the next couple of days were awkward.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of interaction, but I think we were able to reach out, and I think things are better now. So, I mean, still not in a place where we are in agreement with choices that are being made, but, you know, love him. And so we don't have any influence if we ruin the relationship. So, you know, we have to do our part to reach out and to extend love and acceptance of him as a person. I you know, and I think it depends on the age. So that was a pretty recent example, and one that happened in the past. Before, it was our girls, and they were younger, and they made some decisions with social media that were not great. And you know, Brian talked about some people really enjoying that. And
oh my gosh.
It became sort of a, oh, look what they did, and it made its way around.
I remember
Several people before.
We had adult
leaders
in a church passing around a video that our girls participated in.
I was trying to be ambiguous.
I mean, so many people, they passed it around, and it was a lip sync deal. And they got sucked into it by some peers, and multiple adults shared that. And you know how that works. And these are people that are supposed to be supporting us and helping our kids walk with the Lord. And what they did is they shamed our girls and made them want to hide. And it still makes me angry. Like, I have chosen to forgive, but that instance, this is nothing. You said this was lighter. This is not lighter. This is actually, like, I borderline want to fight somebody. Right
Well,
now.
it's lighter in the sense that it's over. Like, it's not.
It is over, but it was so.
Although now maybe it's not over.
It was so wrong.
It was very wrong on behalf of the adults. And so I guess in that instance, we did not agree with what the choices that they made at all. Even at that point, even under those circumstances, I still believe they should have known better. It should not have happened. So I still, stand by that. But they experienced the consequences of that, and even, I think, more than what was even deserved. They weren't punished. I mean, I think maybe we took their phones, like obligatory, take their phone and take their cell phone, for
I thought I remembered that.
They did. They
a
lost their
week
phones.
or whatever. But I mean, honestly, I think that was so inconsequential. I mean, I think our job at that point was to be more of you have a safe space. You made a mistake. It's going to happen. These are the consequences, but I think you'll do better in the future, and I think for the most part they really have. I think it was so handled so poorly by other people. We sort of got to be a hero in that situation, as opposed to, this other one where we have to be the one that's like, this isn't good.
Yeah.
And we don't think it's good.
Yeah. So I think this has been good. I think we could talk about this forever, and I think we're going to have many more podcasts about this.
Yeah, I don't like this podcast.
Yeah. Well,
I hate this podcast, as a matter of fact.
it was. I'm not going to.
Should I go ring the doorbell?
That might help.
No, just press the delete button.
Well, we got more to go because it was only 2 chapters worth of questions, and there's a lot more in this book, and I haven't read it yet. So wait until we read it, and then I'm sure we're going to have more. Here's what I'll leave you with. Part of the title of the book is "Keep Your Mouth Shut and the Welcome Mat Out." So how are you two? I'm going to leave it with you two because this is not about us right now, because you have kids outside of the house. How are you doing that?
Well, you bite your tongue a lot for the keeping quiet. So
Tastes a lot of blood.
you do. I mean, really, it sounds funny, but I mean, there are times where it's like people talk and you say, huh.
Really? Okay.
Tell me more, I think. And you just don't talk, and it's awkward, and it doesn't feel natural, and you fight every instinct inside of you. It's hard. But I think as far as the welcome mat open or welcome mat out, I think it's trying to let people know, hey, we want you here.
Yep. We love you.
We love you.
That'll never change.
I try to do. I want to be very careful, and I'm not sure that I do a great job with it. Honestly, I'm trying to figure it out. But I don't want anybody to feel guilty, So I try to be really careful in how I say things. But that sometimes I'll just say, "Hey, I was thinking about you this morning. I just wanted you to know I love you," and then I stop talking. And I think that for me, it's hey, I just want you to know, regardless of what happens today, or if I know, hey, I know you have a test today, I hope it goes great, and just stop talking. You know what I mean? Trying to do those things so that they know that what's important to them, what's going on in their lives, it's important to me too. And then if they want to say something else, let them be the one to say it.
I think if I have a thought that I would like to share, for the most part, I ask for permission at this point. Would you want my input on this? And if they say no, I'm not going to share it.
Yeah. I think that some people are more assertive and they'll say no. They will say no. I think you have a couple that will just be like, yes, even though they don't really want it. You know, I think that makes it hard.
It does make it hard.
Well,
how's that for
I think it's
crappy
great.
answers?
No. I think it's, I mean, we're not there yet, so I don't know. I think this is interesting. I can see why this topic hit the way it did with people at church. I get it. Up until right now, before this podcast, I don't know that I really understood it. So I understand it at least a little bit better now, especially as having someone that's 15 going through things that I don't like. And he hasn't done anything wrong, but I don't like, so I get it. So if you found it helpful today at all, I would tell you we'll have links in the notes to Dr. Jim Burns' book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children, Keep Your Mouth Shut, and The Welcome Mat Out. If you want to pick that up, I know I've recommended it to family members that I've not even read it, and they came back to me and said it was very helpful. So there's something to this book. I would tell you that if you've got adult children or kids getting ready to be there, apparently this is a fantastic book. And again, I've read it. 2 people have, 2 people haven't. We'll get that on the next podcast, the next time we get back to this podcast. But if you found this at all helpful, I would encourage you to like and share the podcast as much as you possibly can. It means a lot if you can actually hit the subscribe button, share button, turn notifications on. All of that keeps the algorithm going in a way that, unfortunately, we've got to talk about. I don't like it, but it is what it is. If you don't do any of that, the podcast gets buried and lost. And if you thought it was helpful, please do that. We look forward to the next F4 podcast, and we thank you so much for being a part of that today, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.